of the incident that we spoke about earlier this week and kind of add additional information, give more specific details that will hopefully be useful for the understanding of our community that we serve, and hopefully in some way prevent or stop an incident like this from ever happening again. As we talked about on November the 30th, 2024 of this year, obviously, there was a fight that was recorded between two females that occurred at the edge of Lowry apartment complexes. Again, those apartment complexes are made up of a lot of different units, different buildings and different structures, so there's not one that is the same. The victim on this that we talked about earlier, again, it was photographing or videotaping these two females involved in this event. Later, she shared this video with a friend. The friend immediately became threatened by the fact that this videotape was now on the air, which showed these individuals, these two women fighting in this courtyard area, and that person immediately left and went to another state based upon the intimidation factor of what our victims unfortunately had to deal with. After the video was posted online, our victim on December the 16th was accosted with her husband and herself in the courtyard area or the parking lot area of 1268 Dallas Street. They were taken to a location of that apartment, a vacant apartment inside that location at 1268 Dallas Street, where they were bound, they were robbed, they were assaulted, and they were incredibly mistreated. Later on throughout this event, again, these 15 individuals that had accosted these two victims went to their actual apartment, the victim's apartment, and subsequently robbed and took property that included jewelry, cell phones, and a number of different items. What these suspects also did is they requested and forced the individuals to give them banking information, give them specific details about their finances and things like that. The whole goal of this seemed to be based on the fact that these suspects wanted the camera or the cell phone that was used by our victim to take this video. They wanted that video removed because, again, it showed not only the two females fighting, but it also showed a number of other individuals in and around that apartment complex that were involved in criminal activity. And so that was the focus of what this event was about. They actually took the phone, they changed the numbers, they destroyed the actual image that was recorded earlier. And throughout this process, again, our victims were basically subjected to some incredibly inhumane and harsh and unbelievable treatment. At around 1 o'clock in the morning, or 1:50, the officers, our victims on this case, were able to talk to the suspects, and they were subsequently released based upon the fact that these victims would not go to the police, they would not make any reports of this event, and they would not do anything related to identifying the individuals that were involved in this act. Our victims drove to a friend's house where they contacted law enforcement. Our officers responded to their location, got initial information. At the same time that the information came out, our additional officers within the Aurora Police Department responded to the location. Based upon the information and the facts that were known at that time, our officers deployed. They went to a number of the locations that were involved in and around that area. They located about 15 individuals in one apartment complex at 1268 Dallas Street. Those individuals were removed. They were taken into custody, and an investigation started. As the day unfolded and as the investigation unfolded, again, more facts and more details became aware to law enforcement and became more understandable to what exactly occurred and how it occurred. Later on in the afternoon, officers responded to another location, which was subsequently identified by our victims, where they located 3 additional suspects. Those additional suspects were also removed, and the location itself was searched. Right around on December 17th at 4:25, again, we had those total of 14 suspects that were detained. That occurred throughout the day. We ended up with ultimately 19 individuals that were detained. Those involved 3 individuals that were subsequently released because it was determined that they were not involved in this investigation at all. They were not involved in any kind of criminal activity. What we have now that is detained and that we know about are 16 individuals that are presently in custody. Out of those, 8 of those are detained in ICE, and they face charges related specifically to this incident. We have 8 that are continuing to be under investigation. And then we have 3 more suspects that, again, the investigation is continuing to unfold and focus. The one thing I want to, before I go off and get some more information or ask any questions that you have, the one thing that I want to say is that, again, I brought this up before. The courage of our victims to come forward really changed the dynamics of how this incident unfolded. And I really stressed that last week. I said, had it not been for the courage of them to come forward and say, we never would have known about that. And what else we wouldn't have known about is what's unfolding as this investigation is continuing to unfold. This event, unfortunately, was not isolated to the victimization that our victims had to be impacted by these individuals. It was determined also as the investigation unfolded that these suspects were basically extorting or taxing these individuals, and I'm sure they have been doing it to more individuals that live in and around that apartment complex, but they were basically extorting them every 2 weeks for $500 a month, where they would go there, knock on the door, say, hey, we want $500. They'd pay it, besides on top of paying their rent, which they were paying to an app. This, again, it seems to be something that occurred not only to these individuals, but what we are trying to do in this course of this investigation is determine if it's occurring to many other people inside that complex. It is a challenge. It is complex. It is incredibly hard because a lot of those individuals that may or may not be victimized in there feel that they cannot come forward to the police based upon their immigration status. The one thing that I want to assure everybody who lives in that apartment complex, everybody in the city of Aurora, who is documented or undocumented, we are here to serve you. The Aurora Police Department will go out of its way to make sure that you are not victimized, to make sure that you are not treated, to make sure that you are not harmed. And that's the one thing that I hope out of this tragic, tragic incident that occurred is that somehow we can extend a bridge to our immigrant population, that they will understand and completely buy into the fact and know that the Aurora Police Department is here to serve them. Their status does not make a difference. When you look at this particular event, when you look at these individuals that were involved, again, how they were involved, what they were involved, this was not a one-case scenario in my humble opinion. This was an incident where these victims have been victimized over and over again. I think it's a situation where these suspects have basically victimized people of their own ethnicity based upon the fact that the immigrant population does not want to come forward. They don't want to be involved in conversations with law enforcement because they feel that there's going to be some retribution or some act related to their immigration status. And that is not going to occur. So what I'm going to show you real quickly here, again, you can see the timeline, which I basically went through and detailed it. What all I want to show you as well, the weapons that were used, that were located through the investigation aspect of the Aurora Police Department. And I really want to stress this again, this was something that we did not take lightly here. This has never been anything that this police department has ever taken lightly. From the time of that first incident to even before that, we knew that there was problems in that area. We knew that there was issues in that apartment complex. We knew that there was complexities that we had to contend and deal with to make sure that people were safe. And this department at no time ever shied away from that. We have continually been engaged. We've been involved. We have been trying to do our best as far as informing that community, as far as liaisoning with that community, as far as holding those individuals that have hurt, impacted someone else's life accountable in and around that complex, and we will never stop doing that. The weapons that you see, again, I think it speaks volumes about what was going on that night and what's been going on in and around that complex. This picture here that you will see off to my left, it's a picture of one of the rooms where the individuals, the suspects, were taken into custody. What you see is the wall was torn away. At the time our officers went in there, based on their due diligence and based on their desire to make sure that people were served, there was actually a hole that was here where these weapons were dropped down behind this wall. They were attached. Our investigators were able to find those weapons, pull those up, and take those into custody. Our suspects that we have throughout this event, again, as I stated, we have 16 individuals that are presently in custody. These are 8 of those individuals that we have. One of these individuals was actually involved in the incident that occurred back in August in the home takeover with that video that went out across the nation. That individual is now in custody. It is something, I think, to say about how organized or how much these people want to avoid apprehension and how low-key they remain. The individual who came out of that apartment complex who was involved in that incident back in August actually came out in disguise. He had a female's wig on and a female's hat, And again, I think that's probably a big reason why he was not apprehended earlier. He was actually dressed as a female. Whether he did that all the time or whether he did it just that day, again, I can't make that determination. But that was definitely something that was done and implemented to avoid apprehension. Again, all of these suspects, the ones that I'm showing now, are the ones that are without question in custody. They are the ones that have pending charges that will be going against them. Those pending charges range from everything from second-degree kidnapping, aggravated robbery, first-degree assault, extortion, and burglary. I want to go back a little bit. When you hear those charges, you think, well, what do those charges really mean? Again, I think you have to have a conversation or a discussion with the victims to really understand the impact of those charges. We had victims, again, that were incredibly mistreated. We had victims that received serious bodily injury. We had victims that were bound. We had victims that were stabbed. We had victims that their appendages were manipulated. There was a lot of incidents on here where you think, how could another human being treat a human being like this? To me, again, when you look at the dark element of crime and you think, well, what crimes don't get reported and why don't they get reported? This is one that needed to be reported. This is one where, again, the courage of our victims who stepped forward, who made this determination that they were not going to be victimized anymore, made a difference. And what I'm asking and what I'm pleading to everybody that could or might be in that same situation is please use this as an example of what will occur. We will be there to support you. This police department, the Aurora Police Department, will be there to make sure that you are safe. We will hold those who impact you, who victimize you, who mistreat you accountable. If I could leave with anything, that again would be the statement that I would leave. This department, we do not care about your immigration status. We don't care if you're documented or undocumented. What we care about is your safety. What we care about is people like this cannot continue to victimize somebody over and over and over. And the one thing I'm going to say about this investigation, and again, there's very little that's positive about this other than the fact that these individuals are in custody. But one of the things that without question is positive about this is the fact that we are getting more people that are coming forward. We're getting more discussions. We're getting more connection to a community that's been very hard to communicate. And hopefully by the fact that these individuals are in custody, hopefully by the fact that they are not out victimizing people, we will get more victims step forward. We will get more opportunities to change the dynamics of somebody's life who lives in the city of Aurora. So with that, I'd like to open up to any questions that you have.
Chief, the victims are still very scared for their safety, and they want to know what's going to be done to protect them because they fear retaliation against them and family members in their country as well.
Absolutely. And again, I think that's really an important aspect. And when I sit here and I say, hey, just come forward, it's not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal. It's a big deal because we have people, again, who are in this country. They have very little connection to people in and around here. They have very little relationships. They have very little knowledge of what the function of law enforcement in here, what the aspect of law enforcement can or cannot do, what law enforcement is in their home community compared to what law enforcement is in the city of Aurora or anywhere in the United States is very different. So to them, again, I hope what they have gotten since they have gotten here is an example of what will continue. We are dedicated to their service at all different levels. And again, it doesn't involve just this police department. It involves the medical clinicians that treated them. It involves, we have an incredible victim service unit here that has gone out, that has liaisoned with them, that has put them in a safe place, in a safe area. We are doing everything that we can do to ensure that they get that help and support that they need, not just during this event, but for the long term. And so again, when you say they are very scared, yeah, absolutely they're scared. I think anybody would be scared that had to endure or go through that situation. But we have services, we have entities, we have operations, we have plans and strategies to serve that and to help that. And those are exactly the things that we have done within this agency.
Chief, on Tuesday you said you had no doubt this was a gang crime, but that you didn't know enough yet to say what gang might be involved. What can you tell us now?
Without question, it is a gang crime. That is very clear. Again, when you get this number of people involved in a situation, that doesn't just happen spontaneously. I will say without question, in my opinion, this is TDA activity. Some of these individuals have been identified as TDA gang members. It's something that we are working very close with our partners in HSI and DHS to establish their relationship to gangs. Again, I'm very open about this conversation, about how it's impactful to this event. TDA, gangs in themselves, when they don't self-identify, is a real challenge to try to say, hey, 100% you are a gang member. But when you look at the circumstances of this, when you look at the events of this, when you look at the individuals involved in this, when you look at the veracity and the violence involved in this, again, it is not a big step for me to say that they are TDA gang members. All of the individuals that were tamed that day, again, had some relation to this event. There was no mass sweep. There was no big deportation. There was nothing where we went in and door-knocked apartment buildings and took innocent families or innocent groups out. Everybody that was picked up, everybody that was detained, everybody that was investigated, and everybody that is still being investigated was specifically related and involved to this incredibly, incredibly violent event.
Chamberlain, could you clarify what was the role of ICE and HERO in this action? Because according with your words a few days ago, you said that police department, Aurora Police Department invited ICE to identify the people involved. But ICE, in a statement, said that they were leading the enforcement operation in Aurora. So what was the role of ICE in this action?
Yeah. And again, I am not going to shy away from this. I'm not going to shy away from our relationship with the Department of Homeland Security. I'm not going to shy away from a relationship with ICE or HSI or anybody that can, again, stop this type of victimization. On this particular event, like many events, again, people think, oh, this is such a new thing that ICE is involved or DHS is involved or HSI is involved. It's not. This is a common practice. This has always happened in law enforcement, and it will always continue to happen in law enforcement. Those relationships are pivotal. HSI, ICE, they get involved in a lot more than just immigration. If you look at child trafficking, if you look at sex trafficking, if you look at smuggling, human smuggling, again, HSI, DHS, ICE is all involved in that arena, and those are all things that not only impact them, but they also impact us. And so for me, HSI, DHS, ICE, if I can ensure that they have information or knowledge about somebody that was involved in this incident, I am going to use and exploit them. If they are involved in criminal activity, and that is the big nuance or the big push on this particular statement, if they're involved in criminal activity. And these individuals were not only involved in criminal activity, these individuals were involved in extremely violent criminal activity. So I will use whatever resource is there, whatever resource is available, to make sure that the community of Aurora is safe, all the community, whether documented or undocumented, whether a citizen or non-citizen, it makes no difference. I will use whatever resource is available. And I really want to let everybody know, again, this is nothing new. We have a task force, it's called Raven. Raven is a task force that focuses specifically on violent activity and violent crime. That is a collaboration between a lot of different resources. It's a collaboration between ATF, it's a collaboration between HSI, it's a collaboration between our resources and other entities in and around the Denver metropolitan area. And all of those resources come together because each of them have a different skill set or a different knowledge or a different ability that can help us hold people that victimize somebody accountable. So again, when you ask about ICE or HSI, that's what they were there for. This was not a mass deportation. We did not do a knee-jerk on this. We did not say, oh, this apartment complex is terrible, so what we're going to do is just take every person that's undocumented or an immigrant, take them into custody. This was very, very laser-specific and very, very detailed on the individuals that caused the harm. The individuals that caused the harm, which is shocking and incredibly saddening, they caused the harm to people in their own ethnicity. They cause the harm to people that they don't care that they victimize over and over again and mistreat and misuse, even though they come from the same country, the same location, has gone through the same hardship to get here. They continue to victimize the same ethnicity because they are an easy victim to do. Because again, people feel that if I go to the police, something bad's going to happen, I'm going to get deportated. That is not what a municipal law enforcement agencies do. And I really do get passionate about that because again, you see people and they're talking, oh, the rights of these individuals and were the rights violated. These individuals tortured somebody. These individuals took two people into custody against their will. They tortured them. They mistreated them for hours and hours. They stabbed them. They beat them profusely. Again, if I can use any federal agency to take people like this into custody, I will do it. Next question.
Do you believe there are still more TDA gang members in the Edge at Lowry? And how many overall TDA gang members do you think still might be in Aurora?
And again, I think that's really the hard question that we have struggled with since the beginning. Again, I don't think that at any point the Aurora Police Department ever said that gangs or TDA is not involved in this. At no point. But the hard part, and I've said this over and over again, the hard part is identifying the TDA, is being able to say 100% unequivocally that this is a TDA gang member. Again, you look at these photos here. If I was to take a whiteboard and put 50 photos of people with the same ethnicity as these individuals, I would like you to tell me which ones are the TDA and which ones are just immigrants or which ones are just people of the same ethnicity. And that's how hard it is for law enforcement. Unless they do an overt act, unless they self-identify, unless there's specifically information or some type of thing that tells us these are TDA gang members, again, that has been the struggle all along. It's never been a denial that TDA is here. It's never been a denial that there's not a gang problem in Aurora, because there is a gang problem in Aurora. I've said that openly many times. And that gang problem is not unique just to the ethnicity of Venezuelans. That gang problem, like any major city, is the problem of every major city. It's black, it's Hispanic, it's Asian gangs, it's all different gangs, it's white gangs. It doesn't make a difference. The TDA is so challenging because there is very limited information about them. There is very limited, if any, self-identification. When you look at these photos, again, they're not dressed in any particular way. This isn't like we're going back to the 1980s where you used to see gangs dress in very specific attire or stand in a very specific way or act in a very specific way. These individuals could be anywhere. And so again, that is always a struggle. I do believe, without question, that there are TDA gang members in the city of Aurora still. We are going to focus on that. I think, too, the important part, too, is not only the enforcement component, but it's also the intervention component. And for a lot of people, it's like, well, what does intervention mean to you? Again, we are working right now with National Network for Safer Communities, and we are discussing how can we identify gang members at the early foundational stages of tipping into being a gang member, where we can hopefully do some kind of intervention, some kind of prevention to change the dynamics and the trajectory of where those individuals are going. This, to me, is challenging, but we are not going to stop. We are going to basically continue to focus on enforcement, continue to focus on addressing this issue, and the one thing I'm never going to do is randomly say that, yes, these individuals are TDA, or these individuals are not, or these individuals are gangsters or criminals, when I don't know 100% for certain that they are. We are a constitutionally driven law enforcement agency. We are going to do everything ethically and morally possible to hold individuals accountable. One thing we're not going to do is fall into the arena of moral panic where we say just because you were there or you were here that you are now a TDA gang member. It cannot happen that way. We have to be very concise, very consistent. And I'll be honest with everybody in this room, it is not going to be an easy process. It is going to be a challenge, but we are not going to stop.
And to follow up, a moment ago, I think this is at least the first time I've heard someone conclusively declare that the suspects are TDA gang members. ICE had said they were suspected of being either gang members or associated with. Am I hearing you here today say that you 100% believe that some of these are TDA gang members?
Yes, you are. That's correct. Some of these, without question, are 100% TDA, and we are focused on that. And I believe everybody else who right now, they're in the associate arena. And so again, either they are actively involved in it or they are associating with it. The big part for me, and again, when I talk about interprevention, it's about getting those associates, those individuals that are tipping in towards gang life, tipping in towards victimizing others, and trying to stop it and trying to prevent it. Both of these cases, holding someone accountable and trying to stop it and prevent it before it occurs, is incredibly challenging when you're dealing with a group of individuals that will never self-identify. They hardly ever come forward to police contact. It makes it an incredibly hard thing. So again, for everybody in this room, that's why this is so important to me, because hopefully you're going to be able to articulate that out. Hopefully you're going to reach 100,000 homes or millions of homes that I can't get into, that our officers can't get into. Hopefully you're going to be able to tell our story that we want to support and help people that are involved in very similar situations to what we are gone through here just last week or this week.
Do you have reason to believe that some of these individuals have connections to other buildings in Aurora, and this could be happening at different buildings in the city?
And again, I think that's going to be part of the investigation process. Again, we always look at our hot spots. We always look at where our crime trends are. We always look for familiarity. Again, we have some incredible analytic platforms and processes that will hopefully start to bubble up patterns of conducts, of issues, or things related specifically. But that is always the challenge. Again, when you go up to this apartment complex, you can go right next door and there's another apartment complex that doesn't look impacted at all. And I think that speaks volumes about how this apartment complex was run originally and what some of the issues were. Again, there was no management here. There was no oversight. There was no cleanliness. There was no control. It was basically a free zone where the management company, the ownership company, basically said, hey, we're stepping away from this, and it's going to happen, whatever's going to happen. And I think that the problem with that, too, is a lot of people talk about, well, just do a nuisance complaint or just shut it down. Well, that's challenging, too, because there's still humans that live in this place. There's still humans that unfortunately have no other means of getting another location. They have no identification. They have no processes. They have no understanding. They have no money. So to say, yeah, we're just going to kick everybody out, that's a challenge. So again, you do a nuisance complaint, and that's what's going to happen. Every place gets shut down. So for us, it's really imperative that we focus on the victimization and we stop it without having to dehouse all the families that live there, because there's multiple families. It's not just the families that are Venezuelan either. There's all ethnicities that are in that location, all races.
And these gang members lived on the property, right?
They did, that we know of, yes.
Are all 16 still in ICE custody that you're talking about here?
They are.
And when will you have a chance to talk to them for your investigation?
That's been ongoing. Again, the diligence of this department has been unmatched. We have detectives, we have officers, we have staff that have not slept since this event has occurred. They have been working 24 hours around the clock to make sure that these individuals are held accountable, to make sure that all assets or aspects of this investigation are underway. Again, the filing process has been a process without question to make sure that these individuals, the cases that are against them, the ones that I discussed, the second-degree kidnap, the aggravated robbery, the first-degree assault, the extortion, the burglary, again, those are all filed, and the district attorney has the information that they need to continue on.
So you filed arrest charges already on these guys?
They're in the process. All of them are.
When do you expect those to be complete?
We're hoping by next week for sure.
Chief, do you know the immigration status of the two victims?
Yes, they were undocumented.
And is ICE interested in them, do you know?
Not at this point. Not at this point. And again, you know, that's always a question that comes up, and I want to be clear to everybody. Again, if what we don't ever want to do is deter victims from coming forward. I think that this is really a breaking point in that. I hope that you can communicate to everybody that, again, we need victims to come forward. We need to know what's going on. I referred to it earlier in this conversation about the dark elements of crime. That's what a dark element of crime is. It's like a domestic violence situation where you have somebody who's abused. It goes on inside their own home, and yet they never come forward and talk about it or detail it out. That is a dark element of crime. This is an example of dark element of crime too, where individuals that are immigrants who fear coming forward because of their immigration status don't come forward, and they get victimized over and over again. That is not what the role of our department is. That's not what the role of municipal law enforcement is to get involved in the immigration process. Our role is to serve. It's very simple for the immigrant community. If you don't want to have a negative contact with law enforcement, then don't break the law. It's that simple. If you do not want to have a negative contact with law enforcement, then don't victimize somebody. Don't break the law. But on the other hand, if you are getting victimized, if you're getting mistreated, this uniform, this badge on anybody is there to serve you, is there to protect you. And that is a message that I hope resonates throughout that community or in all immigrant communities as we have this conversation today about what occurred.
Mayor Hoffman did express some frustrations with lack of support from the Denver mayor. Does your department kind of echo that sentiment with DPD?
I think that lack of support, it goes beyond just a Denver mayor. It goes beyond a municipality. It's like I mentioned before, again, when you look at how this kind of perfect storm came to be, when you look at the unvetted, uncontrolled immigration that occurred, and again, when you look at the federal government, and I'm not talking our federal law enforcement partners, I'm talking the federal government as a whole. Again, when you look at that aspect of how it was basically, hey, once they get across the border, that's all we really care about. Well, there's a lot more to care about. And I think what we see here and the circumstances related to this are an example of that. It details the fact that, again, there needs to be infrastructure in place. There needs to be support. There needs to be somebody that tells these people what to do and how to do it and how to survive. If not, again, you're going to have more or similar incidences of this.
The incoming border czar has said that he wished that someone would be, from ICE, would be standing shoulder to shoulder with you here today. Why is ICE not here today, perhaps, speaking about this as well?
Again, I don't know all the semantics or all the reasons for that statement, but I have no problem if they were, to be honest with you. I'd have no problem if ICE was here. I'd have no problem if DHS were here. I'd have no problem if our DA was here. I would have no problem if many of our other partners, which we have constantly been involved with. And again, that's what I really want to make sure that you're aware of. This is not a new thing. This is not some new thing that just is happening right now where there's collaboration between local law enforcement and federal agencies. There's always been that collaboration. So again, any person that I could have had standing next to me here that would have helped our victims not to get victimized, I welcome that. I had no way push away from that. But with that caveat of having that collaboration is also that emphasis that we are there to support, to serve those that are victimized. It's not going to be to come together to say we're going to do mass immigrations or municipal law enforcement is going to get involved in that aspect. That has not changed, and it won't change for me, and it won't change for this organization. But I will collaborate with any entity, with any function that can help people not be mistreated the way these people were mistreated and what might be occurring right now.
Can you clarify, 8 are in ICE custody and the other 3 are?
Yep, I'm going to give you the numbers again. So 19 were originally detained on Tuesday morning. 3 of those were released. Right now we have 16 that are in ICE custody. 8 of those are detained by ICE and they face charges on this incident. 8 remain under investigation on this incident. And then 3 more people face charges in this incident.
So the other 3 were just never taken into ICE custody?
That's correct. And those individuals that were never taken into ICE custody were undocumented, just so you're aware. Any other questions?
How did you, when you first detained all of these people, it sounded like you picked them up in one apartment unit, but I think you were saying apartment complex. How did you know specifically that the original 16 people you picked up were, I guess, the suspects you were looking for?
Because we received information from a badly mistreated, victimized, bruised, beaten, stabbed victim. And that victim said that this is the location where she knows those individuals may go to. That's the location where they were originally at, conducting this type of activity on them. And so that's where our officers went initially, right to the location where these people were victimized. And those were the people that were in there.
How did that initial person who reached out to you get away? Were they detained too?
Excuse me?
The person who reached out to you that you just mentioned, you got the tip from?
Oh, that was our victims.
Okay.
Our victims gave the information, and our officers followed up and went directly to the location where she was taken and he was taken, our other victim.
Are the 2 terms home invasion and kidnapping appropriate to use in this case?
Kidnapping definitely is. Again, they were accosted out in a parking lot. So they did go back. The individuals involved in this incident, after they took these individuals into custody out in the parking lot, they took them to an apartment. They mistreated them there, and then they actually got information. They went to their apartment where these victims lived, and then they ransacked that apartment. So yes, you could use the term home invasion, kidnapping. Again, basically everything that could have happened to these individuals, unfortunately happened to these individuals.
Can you explain when it comes to the search warrants, because it's one apartment complex, but are you all having to get different search warrants for every individual unit since it's multiple buildings?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, that's definitely been an issue and a struggle that we've been dealing with. But again, I think that those safeguards are really important, because the one thing that we didn't want to do, like I continue to say this, we didn't want to do a knee-jerk and think that every single person in that complex and those complexes are part of this, because they're not. Probably many of them are probably victimized or victims of this type of activity. So what we did is got search warrants for each of them. There was what was known as clearing first to make sure that there was no other victims inside these locations that were being victimized. And then after that, the apartments are held, and then search warrants were done. And even some of the search warrants that we were going for and trying to get, again, the review at the judge level, that is what that's there for. It's a safeguard. And there was some where it was like, hey, you can go there, but you can't go there, you can go there. So there's a lot of things that we had to navigate. And it's like I'll say over and over, not only on incidents like this, as a law enforcement practitioner, as a representative of this department, we can handle law enforcement. What we don't handle are the other aspects. I don't handle courts, and I don't handle correction. So what happens there, I don't know. But what I do know is that we will do our best from the law enforcement perspective to make sure that we are focused on giving these victims the services, the rights, the decency, and the kindness that they deserve.
I understand the knee-jerk reaction portion of it, not wanting that to happen. I think some people could see this and
Yeah. And I think when you get into anything where you categorize a particular group as all being bad, I think historically that's never been a positive. I think identifying or labeling any group and saying, hey, we're going to take over an entire complex based upon the nationality or the ethnicity of this particular group, I think historically that's always been a failure. And that has always been the struggle here, is to make sure that what we do is constitutional, make sure that it's right, ethical within the state's laws, the federal laws, and the city laws. And so again, that is not an easy thing to do. It's like I mentioned the other day, though, we have been focused on that area. That was not something where the video happened. We took those individuals into custody, and it was like, okay, we're done. It's never been done. If you go down there now, you'll see 2 cameras. I was driving by this morning. There's still a lot of work that has to be done at that location. Our officers have continually gone. Since September, we have been on 147 citizen-initiated calls for service. That has been a drastic decrease from where we were. Again, if you look at September, October, November, and December, you can see a huge change in the calls for service. Our officers, as far as their involvement, they have gone on 62 officer-initiated calls for service in and around that area. We have cameras that are in place. We've had community meetings. We have gone to each of those doors and knocked on those doors and found out if they were victims of anything. Again, we could have been talking to somebody who was a victim, but they still didn't feel comfortable enough to come forward. But we knocked on every single door in that complex. We also gave out flyers, both in English and Spanish, that said, hey, if you are a victim of a crime, please come forward, please let us know. We did everything that we could possibly do, and we are going to continue to do everything we can possibly do. But what I'm really hoping, with the tragedy of this event, with the tragedy of what you saw today, it will be a turning point in this city and in this organization where people will trust us, people will come forward, and again, you are really, and I mean this truly, you are the conveyors of that message, and so I'm very thankful that you're here. Anything else? Anything? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chief.